Hi, today I want to do a movement exploration and thought experiment that is kind of bridging the gap between using actual anatomy and then using imagination anatomy, something that you can actually access yourself to feel if you're doing something correct. It's great to know anatomy, but I think a lot of times just hearing what the structures look like doesn't really help you change how you use your body. To do this experiment today, to participate, you're going to need a hollow ball. So I have, this is a racket ball. I also have a squash ball. And if you happen to have a set of melt balls, the blue hollow ball would also work for this. Now let me just give you a quick framework for this. So you exist under the force of gravity all the time. When we talk about your posture, as the outsider, I can criticize your posture and tell you how your skeleton should line up to be more efficient. And I can also program exercises for you to help you work on becoming aware of and using different muscles to help you get that alignment. But ultimately, having good posture is your job, and it is not the end result of doing the set of exercises. We have to retrain a lot of things. We, yes, definitely have to condition muscles, but also relationships, understanding links between different segments of the body, and how to rebalance all of the forces of compression and tension that always exist in our body, which help us distribute force through the body, make movement, especially when we're integrating different segments. So where am I going with this? Okay, domes. I want you to visualize different domes in your body, and you can stand up just so you're thinking of this through the postural lens. Now, I'm actually going to start at the middle. So your diaphragm, our primary breathing muscle. I often describe it like the parachute in gym class where all the kids are holding the sign. And as you breathe in and out, that parachute is bellowing up and down. When you breathe in, it sinks to create more space in the chest cavity for your lungs to expand. And when you breathe out, the dome rises to help you press the air back out. Now, underneath that breathing muscle, we have all of the abdominal organs. And so we have another relationship between your pelvic floor muscles and your diaphragm. So that we maintain space here for all of these organs. When the pressure changes in the chest cavity, it changes in the abdominal cavity. And as your diaphragm goes down, your pelvic floor also descends and your abdominal wall also expands slightly. So there's more room for your abdominal contents. Then, when you blow the air out, sorry, I thought somebody was coming in the studio. When you blow the air out, your pelvic floor rises in rhythm with the diaphragm. And so they work in concert as part of your breathing. Now, if you can imagine that we can absorb shock through this muscular tissue, because it can take force from the earth and rebound it back up. Okay, so the idea of doming is that they work against gravity and can feed into another system that we have to condition, which is your nervous system. You could think of this kind of like an internal GPS. This is part of the system of how your body knows where it is in the gravitational field. But we have more domes than these two. Just finishing off your breathing, there's also one at your throat. And because it has to respond to what's happening in the chest cavity, as the respiratory diaphragm goes down, this throat diaphragm would actually go up to make more space here. And then it would go down when the diaphragm goes up to help close in on an exhale. Now, the roof of your mouth could also be thought as a dome, and although we think of that as a fixed tissue, it's not really. When we add the existence of the tongue resting at the roof of the mouth, the tongue is the muscular portion of that relationship. Squash balls don't bounce. The top of your skull is also shaped like a dome. That one doesn't really move much like this. But in our cranial bones, there is movement potential there slightly. Going down, the hip joints also have a dome shape in the socket of the ball and socket. The space at the knees, also the menisci, just have a bit of that buffering up and down against gravity. And then the arches of your feet as well. We often describe that as a vault, so that as I step, the vault drops to receive the force of the ground and then springs back up to give me force to propel me forward in motion. When all of those joint spaces are combined, as well as the soft tissue, we have a whole system of a pump up and down to inform our nervous system about our dynamic posture and about gravity. So let's do some work on our feet just to get to know what that soft tissue is like and how it anchors to bony landmarks. Now you can use either ball. The littler one, it gives you more movement potential, but this bigger one diffuses the pressure a little bit more. So you're just going to have to play around with how much pressure you give either of them. And remember, you're the boss of this. This should never hurt. But we want to take advantage of squishability to have one effect as well as the rolling effect. So let's start out just feeling the bony landmarks. And I'm going to do it with my foot, but kind of describe it with my hand being close enough. All right, so I've placed the ball under the ball of my foot, and I've pinned my heel down to the ground. So that's touching the ground, and the ball is going to move across what feels like the knuckles that would relate to each toe. And imagine kind of like a windshield wiper motion. You're just going to slide back and forth with little pressure, just so you can kind of feel the bumps of the bone, how close they are to the skin, and even just see if you can observe that little bump, 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 the gaps in between the bone. Okay, so if you're used to wearing very narrow shoes, this is great to help open up that area that they always talk about, the toe box, just to open that up after you take your shoes off. Okay, so you're sensing that. Now, if we reverse it and put the ball at your heel and then place your forefoot down, so I got my toes and my knuckles down, the ball there, I'm going to go back and forth pivoting on the forefoot, but my relationship to the ball with my heel, so there's just one bone now, right, is kind of like this, just I'm swooping side to side. You can also shimmy that ball a little bit forward, a little bit back, just make sure we're really covering that whole area. And observe that. Feel how big your heel is, this big dense bone that is designed to hold the weight of your posture. When we stack up all these segments, we're trying to hold the weight of our body over our heel. Okay, so before we work on the tissue in between those landmarks, I want you to go back to just standing in your regular posture with your feet about hip width apart. Now we've only stimulated one foot, so from just that sensation, you might notice that your feet feel a little different or your body feels crooked. Don't stress that. We'll of course fix it later. But I want you to go to what I just said about your weight over your heels. Rock your weight forward and feel it over your toes, and then bring it back over your heels. And just do that a few times. When you lean forward, you're going to feel your shins kind of grab and tighten up to stop you from falling. But when you come backwards and you get your weight over your heels, your abs and your short hip flexors, they kind of kick in to brace you, which you balance out using some of your back muscles. And that's what we want to get, a core response that feels a little bit reflexive to hold the weight over the heels. When you've established that and you know your weight is backwards on your foot, you should still be able to feel, in one sense, your foot like a triangle. You can sense weight in the ball of the foot, in the knuckle of the pinky toe, and over your heel. Although you can feel that triangle, the pressure isn't even though. There's less pressure on the knuckles and more on the heel. And that's so that when you're moving, you can adapt your forefoot, that it has rotation potential for uneven surfaces. Sometimes in exercise, they talk about a foot triangle, and they actually encourage you to pitch forward. The problem with that is, if I'm even on the triangle, too much of my weight is over the arch itself, the soft tissue, and that keeps it depressed and doesn't really allow for the rebound, that vaulting action I'm looking to create. Let's feel that soft tissue now. Okay, so now I'm going to place the ball in between these bony landmarks, and now my whole foot's off the ground, and I'm just going to play around just first with a very light wiggling motion, like I was trying to color in all this space. Like I'm just trying to touch every little bit of it with the ball. Then I want you to play around with a little bit of squishing the ball. No pain, no gain. No, just kidding. No pain, so we have gain. What I want you to notice is how soft the soft tissue is. How much does the ball squish it? How much does it squish ball? And just play around with that sensation. Now mix the forces, a little pressure down, a little movement around, so you feel like you're actually giving yourself a massage. Okay, now the last thing, I'm going to have you go from your toe to your heel in just a long swipe, and then move it to the next toe and give it a long swipe, so that you're now feeling everything. That the bones of your toes, you can barely put pressure on them, right? Because they get pushed by the ball. And then just sense that transition from toe to bony to softy to bony, and just play with that a few times. Okay. So this is the theory of what we're going to do. I'm going to stop the video and start a new one where I'm just going through the protocol. If you did this along with me, just do one foot, but in the future, I'll do both feet, together on the next video, and you can just refer back to them when you don't need to hear this lecture again.